My name's Jordan Swain Fox, and I'm the outreach coordinator for the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis, or CURA, at The Ohio State University. And we're pleased to welcome you today to the fourth and final webinar in our series, Public Data for the Public Good. And this series has been co-sponsored by CURA and the Research Commons at the University Libraries. Throughout the series, speakers have discussed the importance and impacts of public data access, use, and preservation. And today, Joy Bonaguro will share hard-won insights from the trenches of public data work, and we're very excited to have her today. Before we get started, I just want to mention a few logistical items. If you require closed captioning today, you'll find a box at the bottom of the screen labeled CC. Click this box and select Show Subtitles, and this will allow you to view subtitles during the presentation. During the webinar, feel free to submit questions at any time using the Q&A box. We'll ask as many of your questions as we can in the last portion of the presentation. If we don't get to your question, apologies in advance. You'll also notice the chat has been disabled, so please use that Q&A box if you have any information to share with the event organizers. This event is approved for one AICP CM credit, and to claim your CM credits, you can log into your My APA account on the APA website and enter the event into your online CM event log after the webinar. There will also be a brief survey that pops up at the conclusion of the talk today. And if you have time, we encourage you to provide your feedback to help us improve these events. If you have any additional questions after the events, you can email us at cura.osu.edu. To learn more about our future events or to sign up for our monthly newsletter, you can visit our website, cura.osu.edu. You can also like Cura on Facebook and follow us on X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can learn more about the Research Commons at their website, library.osu.edu/researchcommons. And with that, I'll pass it over to Cura's director, Harvey Miller, to introduce Joy.
Okay, thank you very much, Jordan, and thank you everyone for being here today. And I'd like to welcome our speaker on behalf of myself and also Josh Sadvari, who's here with us today from the Research Commons at the OSU Libraries. And Joy Bonaguro has spent her career working at the nexus of data, design, technology, and policy. She now works as an independent consultant using a blend of data, technology, design, and policy to help make organizations work. She has extensive experience working in complex, highly regulated organizations to accelerate the use of data and technology in an agile, iterative, safe, ethical, and durable manner. She's an international speaker and writer on leading practices in data infrastructure, management, analytics, data science, and responsible AI. Prior to her consulting, Joy served as the Chief Data Officer for the state of California with an overarching goal to improve government use of data. She established the Office of the CDO along with a suite of statewide data services. Prior to her state role, she was responsible for scaling internal systems, data, and information security at Corelight, a high-growth cybersecurity startup funded by Accel and General Catalyst. She served as the first chief data officer for the city and county of San Francisco, where she pioneered multiple initiatives to introduce data science, streamline data access, improve data management, and boost capacity to use data. Before that, Joy developed technology, cyber, and privacy policy across the Department of Energy's National Laboratory System. Her career started in New Orleans with 7 years designing and managing the development of information systems to support planning and decision-making for local government and nonprofits. Joy earned her master's degree from UC Berkeley's Goldman School of Public Policy and her bachelor's in mathematics and philosophy from Tulane University. As you could see, she has a very wide range of experience in data-driven organizations. I'm sure she has a lot of great war stories to tell us this afternoon. So with that, Joy, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Harvey, for that introduction, and Jordan, Joshua, for having me here today. And you're also making me realize I need to edit my bio down and make it shorter. So excited to be here with you all. I want to start with a question, which is, how many of you, if you're alive, know what you were doing on August 27th, 2005? I know you can't answer that, but I can. I remember exactly what I was doing on August 27th, 2005. what I was doing was, one, compulsively looking at the Weather Channel back when that was really a thing. Because what was happening is a very ugly storm system was on its way to New Orleans. And my entire team in New Orleans was evacuating, but we had a meeting because I was in San Diego. I had just moved out to San Diego to be with my to-be husband, who was working on his PhD there. And we got together and we're like, okay, everyone's evacuating. The storm's coming. This is the big one. It's going to hit New Orleans. What could we do? What information could we put out there about this storm? And we put our heads together and we're like, you know what? Elevation data might be an important piece of information to have out there in case this storm hits. So I scrambled around. I spent the day and I put out this map on elevation. And a couple days later, so Sunday and then Monday, we thought we all breathed a sigh of relief. So the storm that had been, it was going to be this huge storm hitting New Orleans. It bent and it hit east of us, and we're like, oh, whew, New Orleans escaped that storm. You know, everyone was still evacuated on my team. But what happened a couple days later, as some of you may recall, is when you have a big storm, you can often get a storm surge. Essentially, that storm pushes the water up, and it pushed a bunch of water into Lake Pontchartrain and the Mississippi River. And what we essentially ended up waking up to was that the levees broke. And so subsequently, New Orleans flooded, as some of you may recall. You know, it's shaped like a bowl, as you can see from this elevation map. So all that water ran into New Orleans, and essentially the city was underwater. So this elevation map became a really sort of big piece of information early on, because since the city was underwater, almost every website was underwater. This was before the days of the cloud. So the Times-Picayune, the local newspaper, was underwater. The city website was underwater. But we happen to have our web servers in Kentucky, so everyone came to our website. So pretty soon, everyone was using all of these maps that I'd been making, including even Bloomberg News Network. They asked and they syndicated this map all over. But here's the issue. When I went to build this map, I went to USGS's website, US Geological Survey, and I found their elevation data and I downloaded it, but they were in the middle of a systems migration. And so they weren't able to have the metadata, the data about the data on hand. So when I downloaded the data, I was trying to figure out, is this in feet or is this in meters? And I didn't know. So I took my best guess. And what I found was that it turns out my best guess was wrong. And so, about a week or two after the map had been syndicated all over the world, I get an email from someone, it was a professor, who's like, hey, I think you have the wrong units. Well, this was a great lesson to me in the importance of comprehensive and thoughtful data infrastructure. And I'm not going to just focus on data infrastructure. We're going to talk about the whole range of public data and public use, but as a deep, scarring lesson about the importance of holistic approaches to managing and using public data. So, chapter 1, why I did what I did in my public sector data work. So, when I started working in the New Orleans nonprofit sector, we had a theory of change, which our theory was that if we made data and evidence easy to access and use, we would then have better use of data and evidence by nonprofits, which would lead to better services and ultimately better outcomes for the people receiving those services. So when we were doing this work, I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense. I really get that. But at the time, our organization didn't work with government at all. And my sort of theory change was like, wait a second. If we focus not just on the nonprofit sector, but on government's use of data and evidence, wouldn't that be even more powerful? Because they are the biggest impact around. So that kind of evolved into a career goal of, if we can work to build a robust data and technology foundation, all domains, public sector domains, would benefit, whether you're addressing homelessness, whether you're addressing research, whether you're addressing road maintenance, right? If all of those domains were better at using data and evidence, we'd have a better, solid working government. So that was my theory of change. Now I'm going to talk about part of the things I did, and then we'll close with sort of my big takeaways. So the first thing I want to talk about is there's a prevailing sense that the public sector is really bad at using data and the private sector is really great at using data. And so when I came across this statistic, which is a little dated now, it was from an international survey where they asked banks, insurance companies, they asked all these other entities, do you use data well in decision making? And only a certain percent, which was 27%, felt that they used data well and forged a data culture, right? And this, by the way, it was 70 leading firms globally, right? And this was a persistent finding over the years. And so on one hand, I was like, oh, I feel better, right? Because it's not just the public sector that struggles to use data. But secondly, I was intrigued about what they attribute it to. And I'm just going to read right from the report. They noted that companies focus on the supply side of data, kind of like, the elevation data, instead of increasing demand for data by business executives and employees. They characterize as a technology push rather than a pull from humans who want to make more data-based decisions. And that we hear little about initiatives devoted to changing human attitudes and behaviors around data. And they mentioned that 90% report that the challenges around becoming data-driven are in people, process, and culture. It's not a technology problem, right? So what I'm going to focus on, and hopefully the themes you'll hear throughout this talk, is how I use design thinking and empathy and cultural work to change people's behavior around using data. Because the technology part of it's easy, though also important. And one of my backgrounds is in design thinking and how to think through a somewhat linear but iterative process around how to design better services and tools. I really think that was kind of my secret sauce working in the data field, because a lot of people in data often come from a technology background, which is relevant, but I don't think it's the change maker you need to really shift organizational culture. And one of the key things when you focus on design thinking is you really focus on problem definition. What is the problem that we're trying to actually solve here? Because you really want to bring the right tools to do the job, right? The gentleman on the left is like severely underpowered in what he's trying to do. And the folks on the right, they are way overpowered, right? They've over-designed something. And I see this all the time in the data world. People overbuild data technology solutions without solving the cultural issues. And where this sort of landed when my thinking on a strategic approach evolved both from, working at the data center in New Orleans, to being the CDO of San Francisco, and then at the state, and sort of merged into like what I called the three core data goals. And even if I was to go into a brand new organization, I would of course do my discovery and make sure I understood what their problems, but our core problems fell into sort of three buckets. And I'm going to talk about each of these as I sort of talk through the stories. And the first one is building the data roads. How can we streamline data access? And so the reason why we need to intentionally think about data roads in the same way we think about infrastructure is that residents in California, they touched many of our services. That might be they touch the school system, they touch the justice system, they touch the health and human services system. And we also regulate many parts of the environment, from air to watersheds to the ocean that's near shore. But the data is in silos, right? Every sort of department and even some programs, all their data are in these sort of segmented silos of data infrastructure. And having data access across those is really important because it goes back to that need to like holistically see the problem. So if you only have education data, you think it's about education. If you might think it's a policy issue, you think it's an economic issue. Oh, it's a funding gap, right? Or it's a health issue. And meanwhile, the poor elephant, which is like the public service need, is, not doing so well. And even when let's say you recognize that you need cross-departmental, interdepartmental, interinstitutional data, this is what data access looks like. So if you know who to contact, you email them if you can find their email. You ask for the data. They kind of say, they put you off a little bit because the reality is data provision and data access is not their job. And so you kind of follow up with them, you harass them a bit more, and eventually they sort of give you the data. Maybe they give it to you in a good machine readable format, or they send you an Excel spreadsheet, and then there's maybe a separate email with the password. And you get it, you start looking at the data, you start chewing on that data, and then eventually you have some questions because they sent you the data, but they didn't send you a data dictionary, much like my experience with my elevation data. And then of course you go into a question death spiral. And then let's say next time, you have to update the data, you have to update your report, you have to update your dashboard, you have to update your analysis, you have to update whatever it is, you essentially repeat the same exact process. So this is like, I have personally experienced the pain of obtaining interdepartmental and interagency data, and it's just a nightmare. And so what we worked to do both in San Francisco and at the state is think about architecting a spectrum of access from open data. So I think you guys have heard about the role of open data. If you can make data open and available and well documented, that's great. But not all data can be open, so you might have to sort of de-identify it. Some of it you might have to tuck behind query tools. Some of it might be secure access, and some you might just not be able to release to anyone unless it's under very particular agreement, which I'm sure in academia you all like. A great example of this is the sort of micro census data, right? Or the IRS data. You have to have very special agreements to even access that. But it was important for us to not just think about public data because public data, that's our kind of internal data, and there's a lot of rich administrative data as well as sort of standard data sets you might think about, like roads and obvious public data. But a lot of times in the public sector we had to acquire data, like whether it's satellite imagery or some business data was important for us to have. But we also had to curate and collect data. We would see patterns across, and this was both in San Francisco and the state of, everyone needs census data, right? But they would all grab it and do different things to it. And so that's just sort of wasteful for all those different teams to be doing the same core analyses or processing of that federal data. So we saw part of our role as, bringing this all together. So great. Let's keep building the data roads. We want that data to be juicy and available, and that's great. That helps sort of get over these core access problems. But that leads us to our second sort of bucket of problems. And I'm not going to spend as much time on this because it's such a messy area. And so much like we need to build the the roads of the real world, imagine if you were driving around and there was, no rules in the physical world. It's very salient to us. And so how do we improve the rules of the road when it comes to data? And as I mentioned, this is so salient on the physical place. So this is a screenshot of stop signs before 1968, and I'll tell you what happened in 1968. And this is a screenshot of stop signs after the Vienna Convention, where of all things, Michigan's stop sign design won out as the one that most folks would work to move forward with and adapt. And my question for you, silent, since I can't see you all, is when would you want to travel? Which feels more safer? Well, I would argue that after there's some standardization, that's really important. And we've seen waves of physical standardization. Actually, Hoover's efforts under the earlier Department of Commerce to standardize everything from like, oh, I don't have one, but the shape of screws, right? But the data world is kind of like we're still way before this time in terms of making data work well together. And the sort of primary finding, both in San Francisco, but as well as at the state, was that everyone agreed we were consistently inconsistent. And so why does this even matter? Well, I think it matters. We really saw this matter during COVID, right? So In California, we have, I think it's 58 counties, but don't hold me to that. And just for fun, I went to 4 different counties and I looked at their vaccine signups and how they tracked race and ethnicity. And so this is a screenshot from one county where they did not ask your race ethnicity. Another county used these drop-down menus for race and ethnicity, but they didn't require it. Another one had, and it'd be ideal if I had this animated, had this tiny little box with about 50 options that you had to like scroll through. And side note, we know from race ethnicity testing research that people satisfice, they just grab the first thing that will make sense. And then they had an ethnicity. They did require both. And then another county required both of them to be answered, and you could see sort of at a glance what your options were. So my silent audience poll, who do you think had the best data? Not included, not required, scroll forever, at a glance. I would argue, well, I'll come back to it. Regardless of what we think the best is, what we saw in practice when we rolled up state level data was that we basically had about 10% marking other, but we had 20% missing race ethnicity. And why did we care about this? Because if we wanted to understand the equitable distribution and uptake of vaccines, this is something we wanted to know, right? So punchline, I won't tell you who those other counties were, but the at a glance county was San Francisco. So I was already at the state, but one of the things we had done when I was in San Francisco is we developed a set of default data standards that frankly, we never got them through fully as a citywide policy, but we put these default standards out there so people could use them, and they did. And so it just tells you the importance of that. Which moves us on to like, we built our data roads. Yeah, people can access data. We have some rules of the road. That's a never ending story. But how do we boost the travelers? How do we drive and spur data use and ability? And back to that report number I put at the beginning, because you could do the data roads and you could do the rules of the road, but it doesn't mean anyone's going to actually adopt data-driven decision making, right? There's no guarantee there. So how do you really spark that? Well, our general philosophy on this is really to solve problems people care about and then back that into really juicy data use, right? And so as part of this, I developed a data maturity model. There's a lot of data maturity models out there, but I didn't find them as helpful, especially when we were talking to our program leaders and our business side. And so this was sort of our 2-step play to build data maturity. One is get your data house in order. So this is sort of I think it's very rare that we found departments either in San Francisco or at the state where they couldn't answer basic questions about programs and services. Maybe a part of their service they couldn't answer. So this level's a little facetious, but it does unfortunately happen. What's much more likely is that public sector entities are experiencing data fire drills, right? So they can answer basic or ad hoc questions, but they usually need to scramble to pull that data together. And if they try to match the numbers in the next fire drill, they might not work. Or let's say a board of supervisor or a legislator or a governor or a mayor says, hey, well, why can't I see that data by district? Or I want to see it by a different set of race, ethnicity, or I want these different numbers. They still then have to scramble, right? And so our theory, building on step 1, was really to get everybody, as many as we could, to level 3, data on demand, where existing data and measures are available on demand. Mandatory reports are automated, and we'll talk about that as like a very structural problem in the public sector, and the returning consistent trusted measures. So because the reality is behind the scenes of many data teams in the public sector, and that data teams, loosely speaking, they might be actual data teams, they might be a budget and policy team, they might be a planning team, right? They could be any kinds of teams that part of their role is to work on data. Behind a lot of those teams is, brilliant analysts just toiling away on their annual quarterly reporting requirement, right? There's some congressional mandate, something where it's like, you have to put out this report by this time. Da, da. So much of their time was consumed by often manual, prep processes using, guess what is still the primary tool of choice, Excel, right? And Excel isn't exactly designed to like streamline data production. And so the pattern we'd see, is some CSV or a spreadsheet would spit out from somewhere, right? Maybe it got emailed by IT, who knows? They end up with some spreadsheet. Then terrible, violent things are done to it in Excel to kind of make it work. And then they output it, most of the time in a long static PDF, which may or may not be read and is no matter what a poor end user experience, or they'll put it in an overly interactive dashboard. Touch on this about like the problem of distributing data in dashboards, but essentially this process happens over and over again. And we called it the Sisyphean reporting cycle, right? So we've got good data and analytical talent in the public sector, but they're spending so much time with these boring, automated, required reports there. Also, sometimes their leadership is like, we have to do exactly how we've always done. Like, it has to be a PDF, that's a report. Why can't some other format be a report, right? And if they just had time, they could actually, I don't know, maybe analyze the data, do something more interesting. But that boulder always rolls down and the manual reporting Sisyphean cycle starts over again. So one of the things we did was design a bunch of services to liberate our data folks across the public sector. So for an example of how we did this is the assessor office, and we'll talk about them. That's our assessor recorder office. They essentially have to accurately tax a new construction. Like if there's new construction, we need to say, oh, it's going to be this much. And that revenue from those taxes really funds a lot of the city services. So it's very important to sort of get this right. Unfortunately, their process for doing this, so they had at least 4 separate data sources and they had over 60 Excel workbooks to do this process. It was very laborious, manual data quality reviews, all of that. And it literally, one staff, it was 90% of their time. So through one of our services, we essentially accelerated in this case, it doesn't really matter the tool, but we help them automate all their data cleansing, data preparation, as well as handling more complex data models. In long story short, within 3 weeks, they were able to create the same process with 95% of the time and down to like a single report. Huge staff savings, plus, all that benefit. So if we can get all of our departments using this, approach to get them to data on demand, that's really where we start to drive use of data and decision making. I'm just going to tell a few stories about that. So I like to put data and decision making into at least 3 buckets. So one is performance management, where you're actively looking and managing to key metrics. That's sometimes appropriate for some groups and it's less appropriate for others. There's also the ability to do evaluation experiments, which is a pretty academic group. I don't think I need to explain that, but if I do, let me know during Q&A. And then advanced analytics, machine learning, all that good juicy stuff, right? And then of course, I would argue that you should have tools, approaches, and people for ongoing exploratory data analysis and data development, right? So you can kind of stay ahead of the data needs curve. So I'm just going to give a quick example of how this played out in our public sector approaches in each case. So performance management. So this actually, I wasn't part of this, but a prior team. So this is another COVID example. So in my old team, they got a phone call one day. This is early COVID. And it was essentially, we're having trouble tracking our supply of personal protective equipment, PPE, across 2 separate teams. Can your team help? And the issue is that essentially the logistics unit, which was under the city administrator, so one department, they were having, they had looking at the data coming from the Department of Public Health, which by the way is another department. And then they also had they had different physical locations. So they not only had different databases, but they had different physical locations for it. And of course, like they had different systems like that capture data differently. You know, one might call exam gloves, nitrile gloves, medical gloves. Are these the same thing? Are they different? And they also capture them by different units, right? Like a box, pairs, gloves, right? So if you're trying to distribute what has now become precious PEE equipment, and you have these two systems with these two processes in these two different languages, how do you reconcile that? So what the team, it doesn't matter what they did here, I'm just gonna go over it, is what they did was within 2 weeks, they got both systems speaking the same language with one shared view and lens. That allowed them to appropriately distribute all the PEPE. Now, I'm going to briefly just talk about dashboards because everyone thinks dashboards are the problem in the solution in the public sector. And so we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I love this this comic from Dogbert. I'll just give you guys a second to read it. I don't have to read it to you. So I'll close with some thoughts about this, including I finally put onto paper a blog post about this entire problem of doing performance management in the public sector. There's a whole rich vein of issues here that I will refer you to, but not focus on. So evaluation experiments. Another quick example here. So in the public sector, one of the challenges that we ran into over and over again is someone has an idea. They roll out the idea. And maybe it worked well, we don't know because they essentially applied it to everybody. So wherever possible, we tried to introduce experimentation where it was possible and appropriate. And so in this case, I'll just give a very quick example of this where we worked with the treasurer tax collector and they had their original letter, and then we worked with them to redesign and send out a new letter. Some of you might be familiar with this. A lot of it's grounded in the behavioral economic theory, all of that good stuff. Like, how can we make these letters easier? And we were able to increase response rates by 17%. Based on this experiment, that department actually built experimentation into all parts of their outreach processes, which was really, really cool. So advanced analytics. So here is where we saw the biggest barriers for adoption, right? So there's many barriers around performance management. There's some around experiments. And then advanced analytics was a suite of barriers. But by far the biggest barrier we uncovered when we were working in the public sector was something we called the truffle pig problem. And so if you're not familiar with truffle pigs, they're adorable, as you can see. And what they do is they sniff out this delicious delicacy of a truffle, according to Wikipedia, up to 6 feet. Actually, and just side note, more and more folks are using dogs instead of truffle pigs. I don't know why, but just FYI. And for us, the truffle pig problem was essentially how to identify projects in the public sector that are amenable to data science. And I actually do a whole talk on how to drive use of data science in the public sector because there's a lot of challenges around it that we can talk about during Q&A. So, and you kind of know you have a truffle pig problem if one, people are always asking you for dashboards. Like, you know, dashboards are fine, but that's not a data science project. That's not an ML project. It might be the output of a data science project, but it's not in and of itself that. Or you could ask for a data warehouse, and that's great. You might use data from a data warehouse for a data science. You might want to have a new ingestion pipeline for that, but you know, it's not, again, a data science project. Or, you know, they're like, hey, we have this business process. Can you automate it? Again, great to do, but that's definitely an IT project, right? So one of the things we had to do was we had to teach business to be truffle pigs for data science. And the way we did this was something that we ended up calling the project topology. And this is actually modified from some former colleagues in New Orleans. And what it does is it creates project types based on common groupings, common problem patterns, right? So again, back to that philosophy of like, what are the problems people experience? And what we would do is we'd describe each generic type and then give a bunch of sector relevant examples about how that type might manifest. So I actually for time purposes, I'm only going to walk through one example. I have many more examples, but we're just going to focus on one with our friends, the assessor. So how it works. So let's say we had a topology called prioritize your backlog, right? And the way we talk about it is like you have this service issue where there's a backlog of stuff. It could be audits, it could be project reviews, it could be service requests, you name it, but historically you've tackled it FIFO, first in, first out, right? What we do at data science is we model your prior and current cases and we group them into categories. And then the service change, because one of the issues I see with data science projects and ML projects is the model on the shelf problem. Like you do all this beautiful modeling, but it doesn't lead to like a process change. And by the way, that is not just a public sector problem. It's a huge problem. And when I've been at conferences on the sidelines with my private sector counterparts. So the service change then is like, what we're going to do is instead of FIFO, we're going to reorder your queue, right? Maybe we shuffle the backlog in order of priority. That might be risk, need, or opportunity. But the end result is that your department is now addressing high priority cases first, not as they happen along in the queue. So an example of this. So this would have been, God, when was this? This was a while ago. But this is something we did in San Francisco, which was they had a huge backlog of property sales. So similar to new construction, like how do we, compare sale price versus fair market value? And so the main concept here is that the city needs to assess every property. If a property sells, they need to decide if it's sold at fair market value. And this is because property tax is based on fair market value, not the sales price. So for example, let's say, I'm an aunt and I have a home that's fair market value is $1 million in San Francisco. Not an unusual thing, but I love my niece. She's great. I want to give her a leg up in life. I'm going to let her buy my house for $500,000. So she's getting a great deal from Auntie Joy, right? But shouldn't the city assess the tax at the 1 million, not the $500,000? So that's kind of the rub there, right? That's what we're trying to do. And of course, the issue is, it's a huge driver of revenue for any county jurisdiction. And so the property market being what it was, this was like leading to a huge backlog of assessments, right? You have to consider a huge range of property characteristics like square feet, number of beds, baths, when it was sold, where it was sold, location, etc. And so this was overwhelming and led to a backlog, actually a multi-year backlog. So what we did was we came in and we built actually 3 separate models that of course took in different levels of property characteristics. And what these models would do, and we ended up automating the whole process, including the parameters, is they would spit out a predicted price for every single property in San Francisco. Here's the price we think it will be at. And so the service change, and again, if you do data science without a service change, you're just a model on the shelf. The service change was we gave them this predicted price, our model did this predicted price, and they'd say, is the sale price within a certain range? And they were very conservative at first with their range, which is fine. And then they would still have a human in the loop doing quality checks on that, which is great. But they would do that and then move forward with accepting the fair market value and accept the sale price as the fair market value and go ahead and assess the new tax amount. So this rapidly sped time to revenue. And then for things where the predicted price and the sales price were like, whoa, those are different. What's going on there? Those are the ones that we would do a very thorough appraisal on, right? And that went to like not just human in the loop, but human like really using the information we gave them in an output to do that. So in terms of results, the very first time we officially ran the models, we reduced their backlog 10%, immediately accessing about 240 million in roll value, which translated to 2.8 million in revenue. And I always say like, our team paid for itself for years just with that project, right? Unfortunately, that's not how like funding works in the public sector. So that's a separate thing we can talk about during Q&A. This model has been in continuous use since. And since then, along with a bunch of process changes they made, they've actually removed the backlog, which also improved the bond rating for the city. So you cannot talk about machine learning or Gen AI without talking about ethics. So one of the things that we did was is to incorporate data ethics into the data science lifecycle, not something you do at the end, etc. And so when we rolled it out as a service, there was a lot of like concern and there still is concern about ethical data science use. And so I had partnered back in the day with some folks to create the ethics and algorithms toolkit. Side note, this is still up. Second side note, we're actually revising and updating this right now. But more importantly, the point I want to make for this audience is that because there's a whole talk I can talk about ethics and responsible AI, is what we did was we baked it into the actual life cycle of our data science projects. And so we would do it both before we did model building and then after model building, because we learned so much more about the data and how it might be looking and all of that. So it's important to have these repeatable practices in a very practical model for doing ethical AI, and because the things we're dealing with are inherently uncertain, both technical and from a social perspective, and you need process to like have those discussions. You also have to realize that zero risk is not possible, and we always have to compare our use of like AI and data science to the current state and what that comparison looks like, and that always results in a balance of risk and benefit. So there's a 4-part series on how we did data science in government. And I mentioned I have a full talk about that, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. Instead, we're going to move on to chapter 3, which is just some closing food for thought, right? So there's so many lessons I've learned over the years, and I'm still learning and I'm revisiting some of my lessons. But just to share the top ones, one thing that happened, and I still get this from academia a lot. And since this is an academic, people often want to jump into the data science and advanced analytics because it's fun and it's cool and you get to test out your new, like, I learned how to do this new like programming algorithm, etc. But honestly, it's really hard to do without the core pieces in place, that sort of performance management and that data on demand. It's very, very hard to do. And so I very strongly, if you end up working with public sector partners or you go into the public sector, you don't have to use this data maturity model. You can see if you find another one, but if you do use it, it can help you diagnose where you're at and if you're not ready for data science. That being said, sometimes data science projects have actually triggered a revision of data infrastructure and then performance management, or set up, sparked performance management programs or sparked new experiments. So, that's where it's like the philosophy, use this diagnosis, but also like listen to what people are struggling with and come to them with a range of tools to help them with it. If you land in the World Performance Management Program, beware of Goodhart's Law, which is when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So this is sort of out there in the ether. You can Google Goodhart's Law, but it works like this. So, oops, I forgot to change a thing, but so here's how it works. So if you measure people on number of nails made, then you might get thousands of tiny nails. If you measure them on weight of nails made, you might get a few giant heavy nails. And so this is a real issue in the public sector, is that like people get kind of obsessed with very specific metrics, but the reality is like, what are the actual nails we need to get the job done? And so there's a framework out there called results-based accountability that I really love, that can help sort of counter but never eliminate Goodhart's Law. And then my version of this is what I called the public management paradox. And I recently I'd been sitting on a blog post for literally years, and I finally wrote it. It's, if a measure is a good public goal, it's a bad management metric, and vice versa. And so if you want to hear more about that, there's a blog post lurking. Also, don't make your audiences work too hard. Sorry if there's anyone from Johns Hopkins in the COVID dashboard, but I found that dashboard was like, I would call it like a data workout, right? I had to like really work to get the insights I wanted, and like play with it and learn it and all of that. I was a huge fan of the LA Times Corona tracker. It was more like a data stroll. So if we want people to use data in decision making, let's not make it so hard for them to use. And I think really the LA Times really embodied how to do this successfully. And that's where user-centered design and prototyping your data products is really important. If you work in the public sector, recognize that programs come in different flavors and different data needs, they vary. So like we have researcher regulator departments, that's like our Cal EPA. They kind of like study the environment and like how do we measure this and all this sort of stuff. They're very different from like Cal Health and Human Services, which essentially funds county functions, right? They don't do most of the work, but they fund others to do. So they're more like evaluation and assessment. And then you do have actual service providers like the DMV, right? DMV provides a service, which is issuing, IDs, right? And so these departments are different and the nature of the staff and teams there are different. So that's again, like you have to have a different way and theory of working with these different groups if you work in the public sector. Storytelling is really important. Data teams are like, I'm about data. Well, you have to tell stories as well, because if you don't tell stories, it's just data and data's kind of boring, right? And so for us, showcasing our work, getting testimonials, you kind of almost have to market your work if you want to get good additional work. And this led to what I called the virtuous solicitation cycle. So it would lead to new projects. We tell their story that would bring in new clients, complete new projects, right? So storytelling as a data person, as a data leader is so, so important. Next, don't let technology drive the change, right? Especially now with Gen AI, which I have not talked about Gen AI. And I have some thoughts about Gen AI, which, I asked them to make this image. And here's why you can't just let technology drive the change, not just the survey results I mentioned earlier, because like things like this happen. Like, what is this? I don't know what's happening there. That's just weird, right? And so you have to drive the change and you have to work with your partners in the public sector to drive the change, because if you use technology to drive it, you're not actually changing the underlying cultural patterns. That being said, I have a couple thoughts on how to think about Gen AI. Is completely changing how data teams work. I don't know to what extent that's propagated into the public sector, but I do think there's some hope there, both in terms of adoption patterns and how we can rethink the issue of data talent, which is a huge blocker and challenge in the public sector. And sorry, I realize I'm going a little long. The last thing I'll leave you with is the data gym. So in the public sector, everyone thinks like data is just a technology problem, and that is just so wrong on so many levels, which I won't go into, but this is an analogy, and using analogies in data work can be really helpful to clarify anything from, the truffle pig problem to roles and responsibilities. And so the sort of model I put forth, this was really at the state, was IT kind of maintains the gym. They rent the equipment, they make sure it's working, da da da. Data teams are like the trainers, right? They help you target your trouble spots, like what sequence should I go in, what order. But really, business or the program, they have to commit to getting in shape. And if your business thinks that it's an IT or a data problem, you have deeper problems. And the data gym might help sort of shake them out of that mindset. I'm gonna skip this because we're out of time. And just with that, I just want to thank you for having me and looking forward to any questions you have. And if there are questions that we can't tackle in this remaining 12 minutes, I apologize. I'll try and hit them offline.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you very much, Joy, for a very stimulating talk. And you're a master of metaphors. I like all the metaphors you had in your talk. I'd like to talk to you at some point about your transportation metaphor for data. I'm a transportation scientist, and I can give you some ways to extend that. But
Oh, great.
and I want to remind the audience that put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them as soon as they start to accumulate. But I'm going to start with a few questions. One had to do with storytelling, which is something that I'm very interested in. And I totally agree with you, is that we can't just have data for data's sake or analytics for analytics' sake. And nobody's being moved by numbers and charts. People are moved by stories.
Yeah.
So what do you think are the elements of a good data-enabled story? What's good storytelling?
Absolutely. I literally have some slides on this. So what we did with our data science stories, ideally what you do is you actually have an event where you tell the stories and you minimize the data science. You start like, what's the business problem? What was the data science? What was the change and what was the result? So what we did was we'd standardize on a narrative structure. So the narrative structure was consistent, and we'd keep them to 5 to 8 minute stories, and we'd have the business tell the story, because part of having the business, not the data people, tell the story is they then start to own the story, and they're more accountable for not just the results, but taking that service change action. So storytelling is not just about getting more people in, it's about transferring ownership of the path forward to the business or the program. And so, yeah, I literally happy, I mean, that I mentioned that 4-part blog series. Literally the last blog post is about storytelling and talks more about including the sort of narrative architecture that we decided upon, and a pointer to some resources on that.
Now, when you say storytelling, are you talking about the internal audience, the people in the organization who need to basically work with data and make better decisions? What about storytelling to the public, especially since we're talking about
Oh,
the public sector and government?
I mean, both, right? And
Hmm.
so one of the things we, wherever possible, did with our storytelling is we made our stories public. We did two things. We made our methods public and the storytelling. So the storytelling was both to solicit new clients, but also to document our work and share it with the broader world.
Okay. And a related question is that you said, like, you talked about the Johns Hopkins people and not making your audience work too hard.
Yeah.
And you also like, but at another point, you kind of sound like you're down on dashboards. So kind of
Yeah.
reconcile that tension for me. I mean, dashboards are supposedly an easy way to make data understandable and digestible to people. Um, what's a better way to tell stories than dashboards?
Yeah, so I think dashboards are great for internal operations where people are using them on an everyday basis, and they know how to use them, they know what the metrics mean. And even then there's a lot. I'm actually working on there's interestingly not like robust dashboard UI usability material out there. There's a lot on information design. And so I think when you have a public audience, the field of information design in using the unveiling of concepts, and what we did in New Orleans was even this concept called just-in-time learning moments, where you're kind of walking people slowly through the data. So it's more like literally a scroll versus like overly interactive data things. And I think a tool that does this really well is Data Wrapper. And so where I feel like I see the best data storytelling is from the world of journalists. So I think people working in the public, really working in any organization, have a lot to learn from data journalists and how they unpack things concept by concept. That doesn't work as well for like operational needs where you're looking at the data every day. But when you're trying to tell a story, I think dashboards are honestly not the right way to do it.
Okay. We have one question from the audience. Jordan, do you
Yeah.
want to take that or should I handle it?
I'm happy to address that. So the question is about data versus information. Your graphic about the data request conversation really resonates, but it seems like there's an upstream problem. People ask for data all the time without being explicit about the why, and often that leaves an unproductive talking past each other. Do you have any tips for how to back out of a conversation that starts with data questions rather than the concept, construct, purpose that data would be operationalizing?
Yeah, I mean, lurking beneath here is like organizational power dynamics, right? So like so it's hard to answer this perfectly without knowing the particular situation, but my hopefully not glib responses will like ask them, be like, hey, can I get on a phone call with you for 5 to 10 minutes, and always start with, oh my gosh, happy to help. I'll be able to help you better if like you XYZ. However, if it's like the mayor's office asking for it, you may not be able to beg for that 5 to 10 minutes, but that's where making data pretty liquid and available making as much of the data available on demand as possible ahead of time in well documented, and ideally with like a data intro. That's how you can kind of get ahead of that. I would say another thing to do, depending on your team in the process, is if you do sort of like data reconnaissance ahead of time, where you're meeting regularly with groups to understand their needs, you're lurking in on their meetings. Like if you're brought into data things right when the business folks like they just want the data from you, that means that you haven't established enough relationships and connective tissue with the program ahead of time. So you also have to solve that upstream by becoming a better partner and not just being like the data people who give them data. You don't, if you're in that role, that's like really problematic. And that's an organizational both structure problem, culture problem, and power problem.
Great. Another question that we have, one project this person is facing in a project with a state agency is their reluctance to share access to a new performance data dashboard with county program officials. Their understandable reason relates to Goodhart's law, but I worry the county folks will remain frustrated and less interested in using the data if they can't access them. Thoughts about how to balance this tension?
Yeah, so definitely read that blog post I just put out. That was a couple weeks ago. So there is no perfect resolution to this. I want to hold that. Sorry, I'm looking at the little QA inbox. Um, so it depends who the county folks. Sadly, there's not like a perfect solution here. It depends who those county folks are and what they're like. A couple strategies that I've seen work is by starting with like some intimate sessions where it's a chance to educate. I don't know who the county folks are. I don't know if they're electeds. I don't know who that group is. But I think having some safe dialogue sessions first where everyone familiarizes and we make sure we agree on something is really key, because the only way performance management programs work is if there's a certain amount of psychological safety in place. But that's never a given in the public sector, frankly, and especially if there's people who want to showboat on metrics or use it to throw others under the bus, which I've seen that so many times. And so I would say if you can find like the safe group of people to have some initial meetings on and then bring others into the fold after there's a clear understanding. The other way to get ahead of like the public narrative, because most of the time people are afraid of bad media articles, that's really what they're afraid of, is just to say out front, hey, we're not super happy with these measures and this is how we're working on them, right? So to actually own the sort of not where you want ahead of time and get in front of it and say, here's what we're doing. We hope to see improvement. But lurking under all of that is a deeper problem that I don't think anyone has a perfect answer to, which is the difference between program accountability and population accountability, which is just your program. You know, I was just talking with someone in the ed space recently, and their program was working really well, but the population level measures weren't getting better because they couldn't serve everyone in the population, right? So unfortunately in the public sector, like these things get conflated, and depending where the public pressure is coming from and how it's coming from, you might be able to address that by like having some good sit downs and like educating your media. But if you're in a media environment where it's like they're out to get you no matter what, the only thing you can do is like hope to be in front of it. It's not a perfect answer.
Okay, I think we'll just about ready to wrap up. I guess I have one last question, and it's probably not a quick one, but I'm going to ask it anyways. One of the things I've noticed in working with the public sector is that it's hard to build the support for data infrastructure. You
Yes.
know, it's
Yeah.
just, you know
Totally.
where I'm going with this, that it's a
Yeah.
shared service and no one takes
Yeah. Yeah.
responsibility. So really
Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
the solution for us? Tell us
Yeah,
how to build this.
I've written about this problem a few times,
Mhm.
including there's a GovTech reckoning piece, two GovTech reckoning pieces, which you mentioned data infrastructure, but in general, government's terrible at these horizontal functions. I didn't
Right.
include my lessons learned on why I'm shifting what I focus on. But basically, I've had a couple main methods around doing this. One is writing a major investment. So somewhere money's being funded for something, getting your fingers into that and reshaping it where they have to buy data infrastructure to do the project. And so it's already funded. So getting in and shaping it and helping them buy something that's scalable and extensible. Another thing I've done is through these services, doing it much cheaper. The reality is like decent data infrastructure is a lot cheaper than it used to be. So again, it's instead of like a majorly funded project, figuring out the de minimis data infrastructure needed for like performance management or some other smaller thing, and then building capacity around the organization using that. So they're all using the same practices. So there's a couple, like it's 10 o'clock, or I guess it's 1 o'clock your all's time. There's other things, but we don't have time to talk about the different methods I've used over the years, but it's absolutely an issue.
So we should go to some of your writings at medium.com where you've talked about this, you would suggest.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for a very stimulating talk, and we appreciate that. Really nice closing to our summer webinar series on, public data for the public good. And I just want to announce our autumn 2025 webinar series. It will be on the theme of data for access and opportunity. So our series this fall will examine how data is being used to impact the opportunities and access afforded to people. And we'll hear from experts in academic, non-academic, across different domains, who will talk about how they're thinking about using data to afford access to opportunity. The schedule is still being finalized, but I will announce the first talk in this series will be on Friday, February 26th. This will be from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time, a little bit different time than we usually have. And it'll feature Tracy Lorio from Carleton University in Canada, who's a well-known critical data scholar who works on open data, big data, and data governance with the goal of making systems more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. So that'll be Friday, September 26th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And the rest of the schedule will be announced shortly on our website, just being finalized. So thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you in our webinar series in the fall. And as always, take care and be well. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.